Noor Mukadam was like any other Pakistani woman. She was living a happy life with loving siblings, doting parents, and a caring boyfriend. But by early 2021, something had shifted in Noor's life. Something wasn't quite right, and the people around her could sense it. But what they could never sense was what would happen next. Noor was about to become a symbol of feminism. Noor would go down in history.
Aishwarya, cases that involve hate and violence against women strike a particular chord in my heart. Of course, cases which have psychopaths have an interesting psychological component to it, which is nice to research. But cases like these, which have violence against women, stem from societal issues like male privilege, and they take on a completely different angle. I get a sense that the case we are doing today is of the latter.
You're right, Aryaan. Cases like these are hard to cover. In some instances, women are victims of crime only because of chance. And what I mean by that is a man in the same position wouldn't have changed the nature of the crime necessarily. But there are other cases where the crime occurs only because it was a woman in that place at that time. Crimes like honor killing and crimes like rape. This story, Noor's story, is one such case. And I hope you're ready.
As ready as I'll ever be. So tell us, who is Noor? Where are you taking us today?
So for this case today, I'm taking you back almost 30 years to Amman, the capital of Jordan, on October 23rd, 1993. Shaukat Mukadam, a famous Pakistani diplomat stationed in Jordan, and his wife Kausar Mukadam had just had a beautiful baby girl, their youngest child, who they named Noor. Shaukat was a man with a long and illustrious diplomatic career, serving as Pakistan's ambassador to Kazakhstan and South Korea. By any standard, the Mukadam family was both well-known and well-off. Even though he had an accomplished professional life, Shaukat still had the time to be a family man. His two daughters and son were the lights of his and his wife's lives. Noor's childhood was spent all across the world. From Jordan, the family moved to Islamabad in Pakistan and then eventually to South Korea, where Noor completed high school. After South Korea, the family moved to Kazakhstan, but Noor decided to move to the US to live with her older sister, Sarah. But there was a missing piece in Noor's life. Islamabad was the only place where she felt at home, and so it was no surprise when she decided to move back there. It was in Islamabad, through her parents, that Noor was introduced to a handsome and charming man named Zahir Jafar. But good looks weren't the only thing that Zahir brought to the table. He was also the son of what was one of Pakistan's wealthiest and most powerful families. A dual citizen of the United States and Pakistan, Zahir was the heir to a multi-million-dollar real estate business, which was well known for its contracts with the military and hosting lavish business dinners. And it was at one of those lavish business dinners where Noor and Zahir would meet for the first time. Their romantic relationship grew slowly until around 2018, when the two made it official and started dating exclusively. Noor fell in love with Zahir because there was more to him than the parties and the lavish lifestyle. He was shy and introverted. Even though he was set for life with the family's money, Zahir had chosen to study psychology in school and had a license to be a counselor at a center called Therapy Works. Zahir loved Noor's beauty, intelligence, and compassion. Despite studying international relations in school, Noor wanted to become a veterinarian. A majority of the time, the couple got along great. But when they didn't, it wasn't good. Their fights were explosive. But the couple's parents hadn't seen any issues with the relationship, chalking up the fights they saw to normal adjustments of a new relationship. Although their fights were destructive, everyone still saw one through line. The two were crazy about each other. But that wouldn't last. In July of 2021, almost 3 years after the couple started dating, their relationship was in shambles. Noor could no longer endure the emotional and sometimes physical abuse brought by Zahir. Noor's family and friends were happy she had found the strength to leave. But after not talking for 6 months, Noor received a call one evening from Zahir, asking her to meet him that evening. Zahir told Noor he was planning to leave for the United States that night and he wanted to see her once before he left. Despite their turbulent relationship, Noor had been in love with Zahir for almost 3 years. It was difficult to admit, but she still felt something for him. So when he asked to meet, she said yes. Noor left her house and jumped in a cab at exactly 9:05 p.m. By 9:45, when Noor was around Abbas Plaza located in the blue area of Islamabad, she texted Zahir asking where to meet. At home, Zahir responded. Noor made her way to the nearby Jaffer residence, a sprawling bungalow protected by guards and tall walls. This house wasn't new to her. In many ways, it actually felt like her own. She entered the house at around 10 p.m. and inside the house was Zahir, his 2 house helps, a cook and a guard. There's only bits and pieces of what happened inside Zahir's house that night. At some point inside the Jaffer residence, Zahir decided to not travel to the United States. He called his travel agent multiple times to ask if he could cancel or postpone his flight. But he wasn't successful. His flight was in just a few hours and it was too late to cancel, and if he postponed, he would have to pay the cost difference. At 11 p.m., a cab arrived outside the house to drive Zahir to the airport. The driver waited, and when Zahir didn't show up, the driver called him. Zahir told him to wait some more. The driver waited even longer, but he started to get frustrated. He called Zahir again at 11:36 p.m. and was told to wait again. It was now 12:07 a.m. when Zahir finally left his house. But instead of getting into the cab, Zahir paid the driver 1,000 rupees for waiting. He told him to leave since he was already too late and wouldn't be able to make his flight anyway. The driver left and Zahir went back inside. At 1:40 a.m., the driver called Zahir and told him he'd be happy to drive him to the airport at any point during the night since he had already paid him 1,000 rupees. Zahir said he may call and take the driver up on that offer before hanging up. About 10 minutes later, Zahir jumped on the driver's offer, asking him for a ride to the airport. The driver reached Zahir's bungalow at 2 a.m. and waited. At 2:15, the driver saw Zahir leave his house with his luggage, but something was different this time around. Walking next to Zahir was a barefooted woman. Both sat in the backseat of the cab, and during their entire trip, Zahir spoke to the woman, but she remained silent. The cab driver said nothing and just drove the couple to the airport. But as soon as the car hit the Kulsum underpass, Zahir told the driver to turn back. "I'm late and I won't make the flight," he said.
Aishwarya, correct me if I'm wrong and I'll take a shot in the dark, but the barefooted woman was Noor.
From all the accounts we have of the cab driver that night, that barefooted woman is in fact Noor.
Aishwarya, there is something so eerie about Noor being barefoot, even though it's a small, minuscule detail. It's such an easy thing to fix in somebody's appearance. Just wear your shoes, right? But what kind of a headspace was she in that she couldn't even put on her shoes before leaving? It just suggests there is something awry going behind the scenes.
And I think it's not even the fact that she wasn't wearing her shoes that was the most eerie and alarming to me. It was everything else that was going on inside the house before they boarded the cab. It was the number of calls that Zahir made to his travel agent. It was the number of times they called and sent back the cab. It was just the way the cab driver describes Noor as quiet and subdued while Zahir kept trying to talk to her. At around 2:35 a.m., the driver dropped the couple back off at the Jaffer residence. At 3:58 a.m., Zahir made another call to his travel agent, but that call wasn't answered. The next day, at around 9:15 a.m., Noor's driver Khalil received a call from Noor, pleading with him to bring her 7 lakh rupees immediately and to not tell her parents about it. But Khalil didn't have 7 lakh rupees just lying around that he could give. Noor insisted the money was important and promised to return it the same evening. She also told Khalil to tell her parents that she was traveling to Lahore, the capital of Pakistan's Punjab province. Eventually, Khalil called Noor back to let her know that he could only muster 3 of the 7 lakhs. Noor said the three was fine and to bring it to the Jaffer residence as quickly as he could. At around 3 p.m., Khalil reached the Jaffer residence with 3 lakh rupees. In an interview with Geo News, Khalil said, "When I called Noor Madam, she said she can't come out and told me to hand over the money to the cook. Zahir's cook came out and took the money from Khalil." Almost 8 hours had passed since Khalil dropped off the money to the cook outside the Jaffer residence. At around midnight, Noor received 3 texts from her father asking about her whereabouts and if she was all right. Noor's father never received a response. Right after the text was sent, Noor and Zahir got into a terrible fight. The screams were heard by everyone in the house. Worried that they still hadn't received a response, Noor's mother texted her daughter at around 1 a.m. She also didn't receive a response. Noor's parents now started to panic. Her father sent Noor 2 more texts with no replies. By 5 a.m., they had called and texted multiple times and even reached out to Noor's close friends, all of whom were also trying to contact her. But none of them received a response, not until 10:43 a.m. the next morning. Noor's mother received a voice message from her daughter, the contents of which were never formally released. Zahir noticed Noor leaving the message and panicked. At 10:56 a.m., right after Noor left the message, Zahir took Noor's phone and called her mother 3 times using his own phone. He spoke to Noor's mother for 20 minutes, repeatedly telling her that Noor wasn't at his house. At 1:44 p.m., Zahir called his father, whom he spoke to for 30 minutes. Then he called his father again at 2:14 p.m., but only spoke to him for 9 seconds. For the next 4.5 hours, no calls left the house. However, what was happening inside the house was nothing short of someone's worst nightmare. At 4 p.m., the cook inside the house and the guard began to hear Noor crying and screaming from the bedroom. The screams progressively worsened. No one in the house did anything to figure out why Noor was screaming though. And 15 minutes later, Noor tried to escape. She walked onto the balcony, grabbed the railing and jumped down to the ground floor. Her chest and arms hit the air conditioner protruding from the wall outside and stumbled onto the railing on the ground floor. Wounded, Noor walked barefoot holding her stomach. As she reached the main gate, Zahir ran out onto the balcony, yelling at his guards to grab the wounded Noor. When the guards stopped her, Zahir jumped off the balcony and grabbed Noor's arm. He took her phone and locked her in the guard's room next to the entrance. A few minutes later, he opened the door and dragged Noor out by her hair. He pulled her back into the house, up the stairs and into the bedroom, where he held her captive for 2 days.
Aishwarya, these were guards. They were meant to protect life. And it doesn't matter if they were employed by the Jaffers. They were meant to protect anybody's life in their residence. And I just have a feeling that if they did anything, they would have played such an integral role in saving Noor. But they didn't do anything.
And there wasn't just any one single moment where they could have done something to save Noor's life. Even if they couldn't have opened the gate for her in that moment because they feared for their own life, there were so many other instances where they could have easily called the cops. But they didn't. And when Zahir dragged Noor back upstairs and locked the door, things only got worse. He took out a handgun in an attempt to shoot Noor, but as he pushed the gun up against her head and pulled the trigger, the gun jammed. But that didn't stop Zahir. Murder was on his mind. Zahir pulled out a Swiss knife and stabbed Noor over and over and over and over again. But Noor fought back. She scratched Zahir's arms and face, but the stab wounds were slowing her down. She was bleeding profusely and eventually Noor fainted. Even though Noor had fainted, Zahir continued stabbing her. And he then decided to seal the deal. He wrapped his hands around Noor's neck and squeezed until she let out her last breath. Noor's postmortem report revealed that she died from a lack of oxygen. But Zahir wasn't done yet. After she died, he took his knife and started slicing her throat until her head was sawed off of her body. Noor's head was found around 3 feet from her body. The blood patterns on the floor suggested that Zahir had kicked her severed head around several times. And if that wasn't enough, Noor's postmortem report indicated that she had also been raped multiple times over the course of being held captive. Zahir had a history of violence, drug abuse, and assault. He was an avid user of crystal methamphetamine and cocaine. He had been arrested for assaulting his own mother and was involved in a criminal case where 3 women on drugs were killed in a car crash after speeding away from a party Zahir was hosting. But not only did Zahir abuse drugs, he abused drugs while being a chronic schizophrenic. His schizophrenia wasn't new. He had suffered from it for 5 years before he met Noor. While studying for his degree in the United States, his rampant drug abuse led to a drug-induced psychosis which triggered his chronic schizophrenia. To control his self-destructive behavior, Zahir's parents forced him to return to Pakistan. He never completed his undergraduate degree. Zahir's violent behavior, rampant drug use, and overspending also forced his parents to cut him off financially. By 6:35 p.m., Noor's head was lying in a pool of blood on Zahir's floor. Zahir called his father several times in small spurts where he admitted to murdering and beheading Noor. Zahir's parents knew their son was in trouble. "You don't have to worry, I can handle it. I'm sending you guys to rescue and dispose of the dead body," said Zahir's father, according to the police report. According to the police, Zahir was, quote, completely aware of his actions and cunningly trying to wriggle free of the situation. At 7:30 p.m., Zahir called his father's friend and had a conversation that lasted 5 minutes and 46 seconds. "I'm in a terrible fix. Please help me. Come to my house immediately," Zahir said. His father's friend asked him what had happened and how grave the situation was, but Zahir lied. "Robbers have entered our house. I'm alone. Please come quickly." His father's friend said he'll try to do something, opting to call Zahir's father to see what had happened. "What is going on with your son? Something doesn't seem right. He's never called me before. I don't even have his number saved on my phone," he said. He urged Zakir Jafar, Zahir's father, to go and check up on his son. Zahir's parents called Dr. Tahir, the practicing psychiatrist at the therapy center that Zahir worked at. On this call, Zahir's father said something strange. "Quickly go to the house. Zahir is trying to solicit a girl." Dr. Tahir was puzzled by the situation and by the request and asked what Zakir Jafar meant by soliciting a girl. "Dr. Tahir, you're a smart man. I'm sure you understand what I mean. Please go quickly." While his father was making phone calls to resolve the situation, Zahir was making his own phone calls to friends, making excuses for why he shouldn't be held responsible for Noor's murder. Zahir told some friends that robbers had entered his house. He told others that he had been attacked. His last call for help was made to a female friend. "This is a life or death situation. Please come quickly and bring your guards with you," he said. Shortly after that call ended, at around 8 p.m., a team of doctors and employees from Therapy Works arrived at the Jafar residence. The team quickly realized that the doors and windows to the house were locked. Waiting more than 25 minutes for Zahir to open the doors, one of the Therapy Works staff members, Amjad, found a ladder in the backyard of the house and decided to climb up and jump through the first floor bedroom balcony. As Amjad and other members of the team entered the balcony of the room to make their way inside, they heard a gunshot ring out. Zahir had tried to shoot Amjad with his 9mm pistol but missed. The men charged at Zahir and held him down. They tied him up while another employee ran to the nearest police station. But when the men finally were able to control Zahir and started to look around, they saw the disturbing destruction that Zahir had caused. When police arrived, Zahir was immediately arrested. While in police custody and during his indictment hearing, Zahir admitted to murdering Noor. "I accept I have committed this crime. Now it's up to you to punish or forgive me," Jafar said to his sessions judge Atta Rabbani. "We quarreled and we both were angry, and this all happened."
We quarreled and we both were angry, and this all happened makes it seem like this crime was not premeditated.
Yeah.
It was a crime of passion that happened in the heat of the moment. And while that doesn't make it any better, what he's trying to do is get a lesser sentence.
Right.
And I would have believed this was in the heat of the moment had he not slit her throat after she was killed and tossed the head around. That just makes it seem like he wasn't even guilty after the fact of killing her.
You're right. With crimes of passion, usually the emotion changes once you've committed the crime. You realize that you messed up and you try to get out of that situation. You don't kick someone's head around like that.
Yeah.
Zahir was a mess in the courtroom. He would stand up and start speaking randomly, interrupting other speakers, claiming it was his basic right to speak in court when he wished. On multiple occasions, he started to cry hysterically. "I want to apologize," he said. "This case is related to me. You're hearing the lawyers of others, but not giving me time." He begged Noor's parents to show him mercy, but said that if they wanted him hanged, he would accept his fate. Sometime during the hearing, he also said that Noor offered herself up willingly for a sacrifice, but he never explained what he meant by that. Zahir's parents, who were in Lahore at the time of the murder, were also interrogated by the police for not contacting the authorities when they knew Noor had been murdered. In court, Zahir admitted that the pistol he had used at the crime scene actually belonged to his father, sweeping him up in a blame game. "That pistol belongs to my father, and this was all in my father's knowledge." But Zahir's parents claimed they never knew there was a murder in the house. They knew something was wrong, which is why they asked the therapy work staff to get into the house to check.
Way to throw your dad under the bus, Aishwarya. But just beyond that, Zahir's behavior in the court exemplifies his narcissistic tendencies about how the proceedings are about him. And it kind of, if anything, incriminates him even more.
Yeah, he could have really done himself a favor and behaved better in court, but he didn't. In police custody, Zahir admitted to the murder. He did it. Why? Because he was in love. According to Zahir, he was crazily in love with Noor, and he had been for the last 3 years. He didn't want him and Noor to break up, but she decided to end things. This obviously hurt Zahir. He wanted to marry Noor. He wanted her to be his wife and the mother of his children. But her rejection wasn't the only reason behind her murder. Zahir found text messages on Noor's phone with a different man, a man Noor had maybe started to develop feelings for after she broke up with Zahir. But in Zahir's mind, Noor was his and his alone. He saw the text messages as cheating. In the heat of the moment, with all of this information rotting his mind away, making him more and more frustrated, Zahir decided to murder Noor. Whether this murder was premeditated or in the moment, I don't know. The prosecution argued that Zahir's flight to the US indicated he was trying to kill Noor and run away. Some of his friends also came forward, saying that a few days before the murder, Zahir had asked if he could be arrested for murder in Pakistan since he was also an American citizen. But honestly, when a crime is this gruesome, it really stops mattering whether it was premeditated or not. Nobody in Pakistan cared about those details. They wanted Zahir hanged. Pakistan promised speedy justice and delivered speedy justice. Less than a year after the murder, on February 24, 2022, Zahir Jafar was sentenced to death for murder, a verdict that still needs to be confirmed by Pakistan's High Court. He was also given 25 years for rape. His watchman Muhammad Iftikhar and gardener Muhammad Jan were both sentenced to 10 years in prison for abetting. The court dismissed arguments from the defense that Zahir was suffering from a mental disorder and could be acquitted. The court also acquitted Zahir's parents and the therapy works employees, claiming there was no evidence that they assisted Zahir with the murder. In cases like these, one is hard-pressed to ask themselves, how do we create men like these? How do we manage to create these cultures and these societies where the lives of women are so dispensable? There is change happening, don't get me wrong, but it's not fast enough if a practicing counselor in Islamabad, one of the most progressive cities in Pakistan, can kill his girlfriend in cold blood for saying she didn't want to be with him. Noor is gone, but her death brings a new legacy. Let's use this case to give women strength, to never bow down to fear, to bring out men in support of the women in their lives, and to force patriarchal countries like Pakistan to be introspective. Let's not let Noor's death be in vain.